I was 17 years old, sitting in our living room holding the acceptance letter from Ohio State University. 4 years of hard work, late nights, studying, and pushing myself to be the best student I could be. It all came down to this moment. My hands were shaking with excitement. I had $80,000 waiting in a trust fund that my grandparents left me before they passed away. Everything was falling into place. But then I heard voices coming from the kitchen. My parents and my older brother Derek were talking in hushed, tense tones. I had no idea that my entire life was about to change within 24 hours. Before I share what happened next, I want to know where you are watching from today. Drop your location in the comments below. And if you have ever felt betrayed by someone you trusted completely, hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. What happened next taught me the hardest lesson about family and money that I will carry with me for the rest of my life. Let me take you back to the beginning so you can understand how I got to that moment. I grew up in a small town just outside of Columbus, Ohio. Nothing fancy, just your typical suburban neighborhood with oak trees lining the streets and neighbors who waved at each other every morning. My father worked as a manager at an auto parts manufacturing plant about 30 minutes from our house. He was the kind of man who believed in hard work and providing for his family, even if he did not always know how to show affection. My mother worked part-time as an accountant for a local company. She handled the books and kept everything organized both at work and at home. Then there was my older brother Derek, 5 years older than me, and from the moment I could remember, he was treated like the golden child. Everything Derek did was celebrated. Every word he spoke was gospel to my parents. I spent my entire childhood watching from the sidelines as he received praise, attention, and opportunities that I could only dream about. Let me give you some specific examples so you understand what I am talking about. When I was 10 years old, I won first place in the county math competition. I remember standing on that stage holding my trophy, scanning the audience for my parents. They were not there. They had taken Derek to one of his football games instead. When I got home that evening, excited to show them my trophy, my mother barely glanced at it before asking me to set the table for dinner. Derek's game, which his team lost by the way, dominated the entire conversation. For my 13th birthday, I asked if we could go to the movies and then get pizza at my favorite restaurant. Simple request, right? My parents agreed, but 2 days before my birthday, Derek announced he had some kind of event with his friends. Suddenly, my birthday got pushed back 2 weeks. 2 weeks, like it did not even matter. When we finally celebrated, the excitement was gone. I blew out the candles on a stale cake and pretended to smile. The most painful example came when Derek turned 18. My parents bought him a car, a used Honda Civic, but still a car. When I turned 18, I asked if I could get some help with a vehicle since I would need one for college. My father looked at me like I had asked for a mansion. He told me I should save up and buy my own. I worked at a grocery store after school for 2 years and barely saved enough for a bicycle. Through all of this, I told myself that maybe it was normal. Maybe being the firstborn meant you got special treatment. I convinced myself that if I just worked harder, studied more, and proved my worth eventually, my parents would see me too. So I poured everything into my academics. I maintained a near-perfect grade point average all through high school. I joined clubs, volunteered at community events, and wrote college essays that my teachers said were some of the best they had ever read. The one thing that kept me going was my college fund. My maternal grandparents passed away when I was 12 years old. Before they died, they set up a trust fund specifically for my education, $80,000 earmarked for my future. This was not family money. This was not shared money. This was my money left to me by grandparents who believed in me when it felt like no one else did. Ohio State University was my dream. I wanted to study mechanical engineering. I wanted to build things, create things, and make a difference in the world. With that trust fund and my grades, I had everything lined up perfectly. Meanwhile, Derek was going in a completely different direction. He enrolled in college but dropped out after his second year because he said he did not like studying. He bounced from job to job, never staying anywhere longer than 6 months. He worked at a restaurant, then a retail store, then a warehouse. Each time he would come home with stories about how his boss was unfair or his coworkers were annoying. It was never his fault. Right around the time I was finishing my senior year of high school, Derek, who was 22 at the time, announced that he wanted to open his own auto repair shop. He had always liked cars, he said. He could be his own boss. He just needed startup capital. There was one problem. Derek had no savings. He had spent every paycheck he ever earned on nights out with his friends, new clothes, and a lifestyle he could not afford. So every evening I would hear my parents and Derek talking in hushed voices in the kitchen. I did not know what they were discussing, but something felt wrong. A heaviness settled in my stomach that I could not explain. One week after I received my acceptance letter from Ohio State, my parents called me into the living room. I remember walking in and seeing Derek already sitting on the couch. He was staring at the floor, refusing to make eye contact with me. My mother was fidgeting with her hands, and my father had that stern look on his face that he always wore when he was about to deliver news he knew I would not like. They told me to sit down. I sat. And then my father said the words that shattered my entire world. They had decided to use my college fund to help Derek open his auto repair shop. All $80,000 gone, just like that. My mother tried to soften the blow. She said Derek needed this opportunity right now, that he was at a critical point in his life, and that I was young and had options. I could take out student loans, she said, or I could work for a few years and save up money before going to college. It was not the end of the world. I sat there in complete silence. It felt like someone had punched me directly in the chest. I could not breathe. I could not think. The room started spinning, and all I could hear was this ringing in my ears. When I finally found my voice, I asked them directly. That money was left to me by my grandparents. It was for my education. How could they just take it and give it to Derek? My mother gave me this look like I was being unreasonable. She said that we are a family, and in a family money belongs to everyone. There is no mine or yours. There is only ours. My father chimed in. He said Derek is my older brother, and I should want to support him. That is what family does. I turned to Derek. He was still staring at the floor. I asked him directly what he thought about all of this. Did he really think it was fair to take my money? He shrugged. He actually shrugged like it was nothing. Then he said he would pay me back once the shop started making money. That was the moment I realized something that broke my heart. Not a single person in that room cared about me. Not my mother, who was supposed to protect me. Not my father, who was supposed to teach me about fairness. And certainly not my brother, who could not even look me in the eye while stealing my future. I got up without saying another word. I walked to my room, closed the door, and sat in the darkness. I did not cry. I was too shocked to cry. I just sat there trying to process what had just happened. The next few weeks were a blur. I called Ohio State University to ask about scholarships or financial aid, but I had missed all the deadlines. I researched student loans and calculated how much I would owe after graduation. The numbers were terrifying. I would be in debt for decades. At school, my friends were buzzing with excitement about their college plans. They asked me about Ohio State, and I had to pretend everything was fine. I smiled and nodded and said all the right things, but inside, I was hollow. About a month before graduation, I was walking through the school hallway when I noticed a booth set up near the cafeteria. It was a military recruitment station. There was a man in uniform sitting behind a table, handing out brochures to students who walked by. I was not planning to stop. The military had never crossed my mind as an option, but something made me pause. Maybe it was desperation, maybe it was curiosity, or maybe it was fate. I walked over and started talking to the recruiter. He told me about something called the GI Bill. If I served in the military, the government would pay for my college education after I completed my service. Full tuition books and even a housing allowance. I asked him how long I would have to serve. He said 4 years. 4 years felt like a lifetime, but compared to decades of student loan debt, it suddenly did not seem so bad. I went home that night and researched everything I could about the Army and the GI Bill. The more I read, the more it started to feel like a real option. Maybe the only option I had left. 2 weeks later, I went back to the recruitment office and signed the papers. I enlisted in the United States Army without telling anyone in my family. When I received my official notification of acceptance, I held that letter in my hands and felt something I had not felt in months: hope. For the first time in my life, I was taking control of my own future. Nobody could take this away from me. I told my family about my decision 1 week before I was scheduled to leave for basic training. We were all sitting at the dinner table when I made the announcement. The reactions were exactly what I expected. My mother burst into tears. She accused me of trying to punish the family, of running away from my responsibilities. She said I was breaking her heart. My father got angry. He slammed his hand on the table and called me selfish. He said I was abandoning my family when they needed me most. He demanded to know how I could do this to them. Derek laughed. He actually laughed. He looked at me with this smug expression and said I would never make it through basic training. He said I was too soft, too weak, and that I would come crawling back home within a month. I looked at each of them one by one. Then I said something I had been holding inside for years. I told them I did not have any other choice. They took away my choices when they stole my college fund. They forced me to find my own path. And if that path led me into the Army, then so be it. It was the first time I had ever spoken the truth to my family. The room went completely silent. My mother stopped crying. My father closed his mouth. Even Derek's smug smile faded. I got up from the table and went to my room to finish packing. Basic training took place at Fort Benning, Georgia. 10 weeks of the most intense physical and mental challenge I had ever experienced. We woke up at 4 in the morning every single day. We ran 5 miles before breakfast. We did push-ups until our arms gave out. We crawled through mud, climbed over walls, and pushed our bodies past every limit we thought we had. I was not the strongest or the fastest soldier in my unit, but I was determined. Every time I felt like quitting, I remembered why I was there. I remembered my brother's smug face. I remembered my parents choosing him over me, and I pushed harder. By the end of those 10 weeks, I had transformed. The skinny 18-year-old kid from Ohio was gone. In his place stood a soldier who had earned his rank through sweat and sacrifice. I finished in the top 10 of my unit, and my performance caught the attention of my commanding officers. They selected me for specialized training in cyber operations. Cyber operations, military terminology for cybersecurity. It was a field with real-world applications, high demand, and incredible career potential. I threw myself into the training with everything I had. I earned certifications that civilians would pay thousands of dollars to obtain. I learned skills that corporations would fight over. Over the next 4 years, I served my country with pride. I was stationed at multiple military installations across the country. I rose through the ranks from private to sergeant. I built a reputation as someone who was reliable, skilled, and dedicated. During those 4 years, I barely spoke to my family. I called home on Christmas and on my mother's birthday, just brief conversations to maintain the bare minimum of contact. I never asked about Derek's shop, I never asked about their lives, and they never asked about mine. What I did not know at the time was that Derek's auto repair shop failed spectacularly. 8 months after opening, he had to shut the doors. He had no experience running a business. He hired friends instead of qualified mechanics. He spent money on flashy equipment instead of essential supplies. $80,000 evaporated into nothing. After the shop closed, Derek went back to jumping from job to job. Except now, he had credit card debt on top of everything else. My parents used part of their retirement savings to help him pay off some of what he owed. Not once during those 4 years did anyone from my family reach out to apologize. Not once did they admit they had made a mistake. It was like my sacrifice, my service, and my accomplishments did not exist to them. When my 4 years of service were complete, I received an honorable discharge. I had a chest full of ribbons, a head full of knowledge, and a future full of possibilities. I used the GI Bill to enroll in a university in Virginia, where I pursued a bachelor's degree in computer science. While studying, I also worked part-time as a cybersecurity consultant. The skills I learned in the Army were in high demand, and companies were willing to pay well for my expertise. By the time I graduated, I already had a reputation in the industry. Graduation day came, and I walked across that stage alone. No family in the audience, no one cheering my name. But I did not need them anymore. I had built this life with my own 2 hands. Within weeks of graduating, I received a job offer from a major technology company. The starting salary was $115,000 per year, 6 figures. I was 26 years old with a career savings investments and a future that belonged entirely to me. I bought my own apartment in a nice neighborhood. I purchased a reliable car with cash. I started contributing to my retirement fund. Everything I had ever wanted was finally within my grasp. About a year after I settled into my new life, I received a phone call from a number I barely recognized. It was Derek. The conversation started with awkward small talk. He asked how I was doing, commented on the weather, and mentioned something about a sports game. I knew immediately that he wanted something. Derek had never called just to chat. Finally, he got to the point. He needed to borrow $20,000. He had a new business idea, he said, something that was guaranteed to work this time. He just needed some startup capital. I let the silence stretch between us. Then I asked him a simple question. What happened to the $80,000 he took from me? There was a long pause. Then Derek actually had the nerve to sound annoyed. He said that was a long time ago and asked if I was still holding on to that. I told him no, I was not holding on to anything, but I was also not giving him a single dollar. He got angry. He called me ungrateful and petty. Then he hung up. 2 days later, my mother called. She had clearly been coached by Derek because she launched into a speech about family obligations and helping those in need. She said I was being selfish and that my success had made me cold. I asked her one question. When she decided to give my college fund to Derek, did she ever think about what that would do to me? She stumbled over her words. She said that was different, that Derek really needed the money at the time. I told her that I also needed that money. I needed it for my education, for my future. But instead of supporting me, they forced me to find my own way. And now that I had found my own way, I was not obligated to share it with people who never believed in me. My father grabbed the phone from my mother. He started yelling, calling me an ungrateful son, saying I owed my family everything. I stayed calm. I told him that I owed them nothing. I had built my life from scratch after they abandoned me. I had served my country, earned my education, and created my own success. None of that came from them, and I was not going to let them take from me ever again. I ended the call before he could respond. In the months that followed, I thought a lot about my family and our history. There were times when I felt guilty, when I wondered if I was being too harsh. Maybe I should have helped Derek. Maybe I should have been more forgiving. But then I started seeing a therapist who specialized in family dynamics. Through our sessions, I began to understand that the guilt I felt was not real guilt. It was a programmed response installed by years of being made to feel like I was less important than my brother. My family had trained me to believe that my needs did not matter, that I should always sacrifice for others. Learning to recognize those patterns was the first step toward healing. I started setting healthy boundaries in all my relationships. I surrounded myself with friends and colleagues who valued me for who I was. I learned to give myself the love and validation that my family never provided. 2 years after that phone call with Derek, I went back to Ohio for Thanksgiving. I do not know exactly why I went. Maybe I wanted closure. Maybe I just wanted to see if anything had changed. It had not. Derek was still unemployed, still living with my parents, still blaming everyone else for his problems. My mother looked exhausted. My father looked defeated. The house that once felt so oppressive now just felt sad. During dinner, no one mentioned the past. No one apologized. No one acknowledged what they had done to me. But I no longer needed them to. I looked at my brother who was pushing food around his plate and complaining about how unfair life was. I looked at my parents who were quietly eating while the weight of their choices pressed down on their shoulders. And I felt something unexpected. Peace. I was not angry anymore. I was not bitter. I had simply moved on. I had built a life that I was proud of, and their approval was no longer something I needed or wanted. After dinner, I hugged my mother, shook my father's hand, and nodded at Derek. Then I got in my car and drove back to my own life. Some people ask me if I regret not helping Derek. They wonder if I feel guilty about turning my back on my family. I always give them the same answer. You cannot pour from an empty cup. And for years, my family made sure my cup was bone dry. I had to fill it myself, drop by drop, through disciplined sacrifice and relentless determination. The money they took from me was never really about the money. It was about respect. It was about being seen. It was about knowing that the people who were supposed to love you unconditionally would choose someone else every single time. I learned that some families are bound by blood, but not by love. And sometimes the healthiest thing you can do is walk away and build your own family from the people who actually show up for you. Today I wake up every morning in a home that I own. I go to a job that I love. I am surrounded by people who value me. And I no longer carry the burden of seeking approval from those who will never give it. That is the real success. Not the six-figure salary or the nice car or the comfortable life. The real success is freedom. Freedom from resentment, freedom from expectation, and freedom from the chains of a family that never deserved my loyalty. Now, I have a question for you. Have you ever had to walk away from family to save yourself? Have you ever had to choose your own well-being over the expectations of others? I want to hear your stories. Drop them in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and share it with someone who might need to hear this message today. Subscribe to this channel so you do not miss more stories about overcoming adversity and finding your own path. Thank you for watching and for being part of this community. I hope that wherever you are, whatever challenges you are facing, you find the strength to believe in yourself even when no one else does. Take care of yourselves. And remember, your worth is not determined by those who fail to see it. Your worth is something you carry within you, and no one can ever take that away.